we just try to think about a more global perspective of this kind of subject matter. We hopefully will be less quick to judge and more open to listen here. When art intersects reality, especially real subjects that are affecting people in real time, there's something special there because we open a conversation. Don't wait for your call, create your own work. Do your own work and speak your truth directly and strongly.
Hello, and welcome to the Theatre Art Life podcast, sponsored by Harlequin Floors, the world leader in floors, stage systems, and studio equipment for the performing arts. Our podcast puts the spotlight on those who create live entertainment around the world, the culture creators, the backstage masters. My name is Anna Robb.
And my name is Ana Aguilera. On this episode, we talk to CarlosAlexis Cruz about the intersections of theatre and circus.
Carlos holds an MFA in physical theatre from the Dell'Arte International School of Physical Theatre, where he studied a range of movement techniques, including Commedia Dell'Arte, Laban, Lecoq-based theatre dynamics, Alexander technique, as well as the extensive voice training in the Linklater voice method. As part of his thesis project, he went on to train circus arts and Chinese acrobatics under the tutelage of master coach Lu Yi at the San Francisco Circus Center. He specialized in the disciplines of aerial straps and acrobatic rope. Cruz is the assistant professor of physical theatre at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, offering theatre students rigorous training in physical theatre, stage acrobatics, circus arts, and vocal techniques. In the professional realm, Carlos was a full-time company member of the Do Jump Dance Theatre and Imago Theatre, touring nationally and internationally. He is the co-founder and artistic director of the Pelu Theatre Project, a physical theatre company mainly interested in researching the convergence between contemporary circus arts and theatre, as well as the founder and producing artistic director of the Nouveau Sud Circus Project, a contemporary social circus initiative rooted in the underground dance, acrobatic, physical theatre scenes present in the vast array of cultures in the urban regions of Charlotte. Carlos, welcome to Theatre Art Life.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to this conversation.
So this is such an interesting career that you have, but how did you start in acrobatics and physical theatre? Was this something you did growing up?
So wow. So I appreciate often these kind of questions on how things start, and often you start reminiscing and you catch your point in history somewhere. So in the timeline. So we'll see where today that goes. But I am originally from Puerto Rico, born and raised in the island. And as part of the training in Puerto Rico, I was connected to the experimental Latin American theater current, from work with Mala Hierba in Ecuador, with Chuyashkani in Peru, and companies that dealt with physical action as a way of creation. So I think once I decided, because again, as I said, you jump somewhere in your history. Even though I did sports as a kid and I was a very physical person, I never did theater or arts for that matter growing up. And I was an engineering major when I decided that was enough for me. I really hated my life, even though I have 3 years of civil engineering, but it was boring, real boring. So somebody in one of my classes said he was doing theater. Then I was like, oh, I'm gonna check it out. And one thing led to the other, and I was doing a Commedia Dell'Arte piece. And I think everything happens for a reason. If I was called to just do an acting play or regular theater, straight play, probably wouldn't have cut me as much as I was immediately immersed in action-based theater, and being a person with gymnastics and sports background, immediately kind of caught my attention. So yeah, I think I began doing theater. I have training in, I have done, television and commercial stuff in Puerto Rico. I work in Mexico City in my earlier times. And then now, I gravitated more and more towards a physical based action, just in order to transcend the barrier of language and also communicate to a broader audience and so on. But yeah, I think at broad strokes, I will say I think as soon as I was exposed to theater, I was immediately exposed to physical theater, and that was a hook for me. And even though I have done many things, I think that's the thing that kept me always saying like, I should go back to that. I should be doing that. I think I'm meant to do that.
How would you describe physical theater? What makes it special?
I often say like it's just the work, the artistic performance that begins from the gesture or the action. I tend to say also, I start with many premises, but one of them I say like, a gesture at times can mean more than 1,000 words. And also a gesture is often similar in many cultures. So a slap in the face is a slap in the face, or somebody putting a hand to stop you is a hand to stop you. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I would say for me, thinking about broader characterizations, basing it in the physical, the physical presence of the actor, and then actors engage in that true and very dynamic physical presence, engaging with each other in you know, in action and story work, ultimately tells stories forward, and it creates perhaps a piece of theater that is. As I said earlier, more communicative, hopefully to a larger audience.
And you trained with master coach Lu Yi at the San Francisco Circus Center. And so that's where, that's kind of takes a step above physical theater. That's into the acrobatic realm. What was that experience like?
So, yeah, but I think we'll talk about Louis in a second. But I say so. I said my first show in Puerto Rico was in the Commedia dell'Arte style, and then even though I started like training just more traditional acting, I decided during my undergrad days to pursue, to go and study abroad for a few months in Italy. So I studied with Antonio Fava in Italy for 3 months in Reggio Emilia. It was in Reggio Emilia where the warm up of the Stadio Internazionale, like it was circus arts. And at that moment I remember thinking, man, I can flip and I can, and I'm in this theater deal, so I have to figure this out. Like this would be open a whole new avenue. So I went back to Puerto Rico, and then I went back to a gym and said I got to recover all acrobatic skills that I can do, tumbling and so on. And then decided to pursue my graduate degree in physical theater at the Dell'Arte International School. And then, when I was at Dell'Arte, a couple of students came from ENC, from École Nationale du Cirque, to like train clowning at Dell'Arte. And they say, oh, Chinese pole coaching is amazing in San Francisco. We should go down there. So I kind of followed that through. And then I ended up like working with Louis every summer when I was in graduate school. And that's kind of how I ended, sort of like truly finding a pathway for convergence of circus and theater, like sort of serendipitous, and also sort of like following different leads and different people. Training with Lu Yi was as humbling as it can be, and also as charging and as energizing. Lu Yi, as a person that has former acrobatic background but was training theater, to go to a circus school is probably not especially for Chinese coaches, it's not like the best pathway. Like Lu Yi, I remember it's like I remember vividly him saying to me, you've done too much yoga, you're too wobbly. And like saying like, I don't know if you can do this. You're an actor. And I was like, hell no. Like, yes, I'm an actor, but I have other dreams within the theater realm, and I want to go back to be, using the acrobatic language and so on. So I'm going to prove this guy wrong. That's what I kept thinking. I was demoralized for a second, but I pushed hard. And then I also remember at one point said, yeah, you've worked hard. You worked hard for this. You're doing good. The thing that I enjoy right now is in academia too, and it's something that actors can learn more than also a vocabulary, is also that level of humbleness that the training of acrobatics brings to the table. Like I said, in circus, there's no gray areas. Either you can execute a skill or you can't. And we live in theater world in so many subjective spaces that is really at times, say what it is and what it isn't, right? And it also at time hard, people just start believing themselves just because they think they can do certain things and have received certain feedback. And then they are encountered with a discipline that no, you can't do it. And for you to do it, you got to build these progressions. So, that's very humbling. And then from that, you can say, apply all of that you're thinking and that level of progression to everything that you do. And I think it opens more spaces for people to continue to push themselves. So I think in the way that I speak to students, kind of saying that same thing, I think that did the same to me. Because, in graduate school, I remember having clown coaches, like, and clown professors saying to me, like, you got to work harder on this or that. And I was like, I've done this. I'm a professional. Like, what are you talking about? But and then I started training with Luigi, and I was like, oh no, like I have ways to go, and I never finish. And I think more than anything, it's just like the work is never done. In circus, you train constantly, and as performers, we just think about that we always train and keep training constantly.
And now you've kind of been working your way towards this intersection between theater and circus.
I think at a time I just was probably naive, thinking that I was changing the world and doing something completely different. And the reality, like in always, there's also always somebody that I have done something similar, have thought something about, because there I was coming from Puerto Rico and then doing this circus training, and then I saw one of the Seto de la Mente, no, not Seto de la Mente, it was Circuit Lost at the time with Daniele Finzi-Pasca show, and I was like, oh shoot, like that is exactly the kind of thing and the sensitivity of the human sort of nature and action that I want to see on stage. I want people to feel, and I want people to be moved by things that for me became very evident in the world of circus arts, which is, not for example, the clown character as a naive in a world of eccentrics and experiencing, things that happen a bit very boldly, in a very simple way. I think the simple reaction is the simple presence of the clown is something that, like, I thought that could be very meaningful to bring the audience back to understand this crazy world that we live in, and to continue to explore sort of that kind of narrative in the creation of work. The acrobatic gesture, I often say too, one of my first phrases was, in circus arts, you people literally sacrifice their lives in front of you for the sake of the performance, for entertainment, for that performative event, right? If we put a little bit more intentionality, I think, in the work, then acrobats are also sacrificing their lives to tell the story that they want to tell you, literally. And to think about that perspective, I think I always thought, understanding that as an audience brings you to the edge of the seat, because you go like, shoot, like there is the level of like the of danger here is tangible, right? In circus dramaturgy, overcoming in circus, you overcome physical obstacles, and the physical obstacles are clear, what you're seeing. And on top of that, you kind of start getting more and more connected to those people that are in front of you doing these sacrifices. I think it, you know and you will hear this in the conversation with me, because my research has take me back and forth from my own training to like moving on to the work that I'm doing right now, to researching indigenous acrobatics and in the Americas, in particularly Mexico and so on. And then like thinking that we have always have had instances in our history in which people do sacrifices to tell the story, to connect with something special, to connect with an audience or a larger population. So, in the case of the indigenous, to connect with the gods and so on. So, I think there's so much power in there that is untapped. And I think in an age in which, like, the world keeps pushing us to, like, the fake, the disconnected, the media driven, like the aspect of community, of like of liveness of circus arts, of that sacrifice that happens in front of you, of the margin of error that is so tight, and is so clear, and is so special when it's like overcome. There's something to that enamors me, and continues to, like, I continue to think that that's an outlet, that there are still ways to go in which we can maximize the potential of this vocabulary.
I think so too. I think because, I mean, historically, when you think about circus, it hasn't so far long ago evolved from just that act, transition, another act, another act. There was more on the spectacle of it than an actual narrative and a story. And numerous companies have gone into this blend of a theatrical story plus the circus acrobatics, and I think it's still quite young in its iteration. And I've been involved in some circus shows that have tried to tell stories, and it's been somewhat successful, but not clearly successful in telling a story. And many people have tried to do that, and I still think there's a push pull in terms of, where are you showcasing somebody's ability and where are you telling a story, and how do you consistently deliver both throughout the arc of a show? And that's quite fascinating for me. I wonder, do you find that a challenging process when you think about creating a show in that way?
Oh yeah. All the time in many angles. And I often, depending on the level of acrobatics that are being performed on stage, at some point, the acrobat's attention cannot be elsewhere but the action to be executed. And that often, I mean, in trying to choreograph certain things, you are creating this scene, and there's so many attention to other people or the audience or so on. But at some point in the act, the thing goes inwards, and it has to happen inwards, or else the level of danger becomes pretty high, right? The acrobat is not connected to the actual acrobatic gesture, and so that in itself, it's a struggle if we just try to apply some kind of theatrical dramaturgy to the creation of work under using circus arts. I think the way that I have learned from that process is actually just understand that, and that's part in that moment of that particular scene or action, like there's that for sure, and that not shine or not like trying to hide that. So that's one thing. Two, sometimes if you are trying to create a show that carries a story, is not about the skill display. And certain audiences and certain groups of producers aim and want the skill display. And that's another angle that for me is a struggle, because in these days in which we're creating this piece right now that is going to hit national tour and so on, we've been talking to potential producers for these upcoming seasons, and we have lost some bookings just because we have prioritized actually the story than trying to do a triple backflip. It's a conundrum that I'm gonna insist, and I think we're gonna break through. We're gonna insist in the fact that the story and the bodies in the case of like Nouveau Sud is the important thing. These are black and brown bodies in the United States telling stories of our underrepresented communities with circus arts as a unifying vocabulary. All of that is raw in our work. That's not to say that in the process I struggle at times thinking like, should I do a little bit more? Like, am I missing something? Am I going too far away from the circus? When, and to which way am I appropriating a language? You know what I'm saying? All those questions come to mind. But soon after, I prioritize the story that we want to tell and understand that the use of this vocabulary for us that lives within us has a motive that is as I said, is beyond just some of the things that we have seen, and some of the kind of blocks or kind of typecasting, to use the theatrical metaphor that people want to put us in.
And now a moment for our sponsor. The Theatre Art Life podcast is proud to be sponsored by Harlequin. Harlequin is the world leader in floors, stage systems, and studio equipment for the performing arts. Established in the UK over 40 years ago, Harlequin is the preferred performance floor for the world's most prestigious dance and performing arts companies, theatres and schools, from the Royal Opera House to the Bolshoi Theatre, the New York City Ballet to the Royal New Zealand Ballet. Harlequin's experience and reputation are founded on the development, manufacture and supply of a range of high-quality sprung and vinyl floors specifically designed for dance and the performing arts. Backed by an engineering team and independent research, Harlequin also designs, builds and refurbishes stages, working with stage engineers and theatre consultants in leading venues across the world. Harlequin is the global leader in its field, with offices in Europe, the Americas and Asia Pacific. Find out more at harlequinfloors.com, HARLEQUIN floors.com.
So do you want to talk, since you already started talking a little bit about Nouveau Sud and the current projects you're working on?
So Nouveau Sud, just a brief history on Nouveau Sud here. It started when I moved to Charlotte for an academic position. I saw two things very glaring here, and it was the lack of diversity in the stages and the lack of circus in this region. And for that, it occurred to me, well, I'm gonna go. The problem of that is a problem of access, because I've always believed that like talent reside with people, and is at times it's just different sectors in our communities don't have that equal access. So I started teaching some workshops and in the region and so on, and ultimately created this company. And it began from because it began from the community up. We got all the potential hiccups of what it goes from non-professional to having professional aspirations. But in the process, I think because we lean primarily on like being that troop in these bodies and in this community and so on, that kept opening doors for us. And a previous show to the one that we're doing now was called Revol, and it was about the Confederate flag as a divisive symbol in the South. And for those of our audience here that don't know much about it, but the Confederate flag is a flag that became emblematic in the Civil War, and ultimately is still used like Confederate soldier stashes and so on as a tactic for creating fear in the streets, and it's an emblem of racism still in the South of the United States. So we created this piece, the story of a flag, a show called Revolt, examining why do we still want to sort of like portray or bring out this kind of like emblems. Just to give you a little bit of a perspective of like not only we are story-based circus theater. That's another thing. People call nouveau cirque or contemporary circus the work that we do. I all the time call it circus theater, to like the to probably like the disagreement of many, especially circus researchers. And also, the name Nouveau Sud comes as a play on word from what people call here the New South, like the more progressive South, and also the Nouveau Cirque, like the contemporary circus. So ultimately, we're called Nouveau Sud, just playing on those words. Our most recent show is called La Bestia, and in understanding that the Central American community in the southeastern United States is probably first generation, completely underrepresented, and probably undervalued, and rights violated constantly in terms of ICE raids and stuff like that. We wanted to shine some light to that reality, but from like a beginning perspective. I think in general, people don't know in this country, that migration actually is not how do you say, un capricho, like we said in Spanish. Nobody says, I'm cool in my country, I gotta get out of here. I mean, I'm gonna go and try something else somewhere else. Like most people that do that, like people that don't have that perspective, have education and have different pathways. Most people that migrate have to do it by necessity. Like there is something that is affecting the family situation, the life situation, more often than not, life and death situation, that they have to flee. And they come to this country, in this case, the United States, to be judged from the beginning, from the moment people set foot here. My point with Nouveau Sud and with La Bestia was to bring attention to the migrant journey, bring attention also to what it is crossing Mexico, but we allude that very lightly. But how we make for our own people in Latin America, we also sometimes are the ones that are putting the tripping foot. But ultimately, kind of giving the perspective of like the journey, as I said, happened by necessity, is nothing easy. And once you get to this country, is just beginning. So I think bringing that perspective, maybe, and hopefully, we open the door for people to be a little more compassionate again, for each other. And as an example of like any population to the Latinx population here in this country is one thing. And also bringing the perspective that we are all immigrants, we are all nomads by nature as humans. And if we just try to think about a more global perspective of this kind of subject matter, we hopefully will be less quick to judge and more open to listen and hear.
Well, that's no small topics to bring into your theatrical circus. It's amazing. And I think, I mean, it's quite profound to think that, especially in that region, to be what is the word, approaching those topics and putting that on stage. I commend that. And how is that kind of stuff received when you put it out there?
It is, you know, we have grown accustomed to that. Our shows are never done or finished. Like, we continue the shows with open conversation post shows, and I mean, I would lie to you if I didn't say we have gotten people saying we create liberal pizza. Like, yes, let's just keep it there. And you know, at the same, and I have had foundations at come and talk to us and say, maybe you all should like be less political. Like, maybe that's if you're a little bit less political, maybe that's an angle that you can get a little more funding. Both things we say no. That's not what we do. I think in part I have had the luxury since I'm a college professor. Like, I don't have to abide to those things, and I kind of like stand in resistance. And probably with the company members that have created this troop of people that follow the same kind of like mission, we all kind of believe in that pathway, and have come to it without I will call it just naive in their work, just in the fact that we're not necessarily in it for like the money making. We are here more for the stories that we want to tell primarily, that we just keep going. But I so those are the negatives, which honestly are very few. The positives, people see themselves. Like, we have had for the works in progress that we've done for the migrant show La Bestia, like families come to us and say, I came the first show and I'm here for the last speech show, and I actually brought this whole for my whole family because I wanted all of us to see this, and I wanted my kids to see this story because this is my story, this is how I migrated, so on and so forth. And like, when you hear that, it's just like that is the most reassuring thing for me. That's why we do arts. I often say, art can be art, and we often aim to entertain and have a good time and have the audience have a good time. But when art intersects reality, especially real subjects that are affecting people in real time, there's something special there because we open a conversation that, is a door that is not often open for people. And because in our shows, as I said, we don't just do the show and like walk away. We know that we are laying on the ground pretty heavy subjects that for a lot of people, especially in the region where we live in, this is very counter to everything they have heard of, to the point probably that they get to see to our venue. We are there to listen. And then we hear these voices of these people that feel represented and people that have some antagonistic perspective just being there conversing. So, almost the performance becomes a pretext for the actual community conversation, which ultimately, for me, that's the most important thing. I mean, I enjoy providing space for artists to create and work and see themselves and train and do circus and theater and all of that. But ultimately, what I would like to see is more community conversations about pressing issues of like often underrepresented voices. Like, that's the heart of Nueva Sud, and that's the heart of most of the work I do. And when those instances happen, which is actually, after every show, that's the only like palmada en la espalda that I look for, like the only tap in my shoulder that I am like, dang it, cool, that's we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Gave me the goosebumps to just listen to your story with the families over there. But maybe it's also both a region and a subject that I'm familiar with. Yeah. So how do you work, or how does it all come together when you're teaching? And like, it's not very common to have, or I haven't come across this in my experience of having circus training in formal higher education, like university training, not in a circus school kind of training. So how does this work for you?
Just by paving the way and opening doors and like saying I'm not accepting no's for answers. Kind of, you know. I mean, when I listen, like I'm in a theater department, and I often say I'm probably the less theater person people we're gonna find in that department. You know, I am yeah, I'm a performer, and I like the performing arts, and I like the blend of the performing arts. And I remember my undergrad degree, my first one is actually in film studies, and people used to call the seventh art, films the seventh art, and it's like the mix of all arts. And I often say no, the mix of all arts happens in live performance. That's what we do. I landed in a department that there were so many transitions. And when those transitions were happening, there were opening spaces for other courses. So, like, I teach this foundation acting class that has tumbling and hand dancing as part of it. And then my second, like, the how do you say, the progression, the second course that follows that one, at Spartan acrobatics, and maybe touching base on some aerial elements and some other manipulation fields. So I already was providing foundation circus elements in theater classes. The intent, so the interest between mask theater classes that I taught at the university, and also, some of the work as I started developing New Vesu, the students were like asking for circus classes. So I opened a circus intensive that happens every summer. That's the only way that in a university like mine, you can have enough time with the students to provide sort of like direct coaching, as in how do you say, intense direct coaching as is needed often to get people started in circuits, and which will give them probably enough knowledge to try or continue training by themselves, for a couple of other skills until they have to actually coaching and so on, because it's often like that, right? It's like, and actually when I trained with Lu Yi, he gave me a lot of material, and then I worked on my own, and then I came back to him, and so on. So that, I just opened, I saw a crack, and I was like, I think that's like that in everything that I do. I see a crack open in the door, and I just go like little, I go, "Eh," and then just, whoom, and I just fully open that door and forget about it, just go through. And I think that I wanted to say, I'm actually an associate professor at the university now, a tenure professor, and my tenure case was the case of New. So that's what I wrote about, and that's what I based everything on. So just that is an example of somebody who went through the process creating social circus or social circus. As the case for that, I am an equity coordinator and assistant to the dean currently. And then I'm gonna say this as but I am now accepted a position as creating an MFA program in community-based arts in my university, and that program is gonna have at center the work of Nivasud, and is gonna bring Nivasud at first case study, although it's an interdisciplinary angle for community-based arts. So ultimately, I'm gonna be welcoming visual arts, dancers, and so on. So, ways in which in academia the training of acrobatics actually can change the landscape a little bit. I think it has changed the ways that we teach acting, in ways like things become more tangible instead of the subjective angle. I think it gives a perspective of movement vocabulary that people can fly, literally see themselves in the air, and they're excited about that perspective, and bringing vocabulary that is so exciting for our communities, and it's so embedded in most of our communities that we see that it can be used as a unifying language. Like, it's what ultimately is the heart of Nuvesu, which is now become the heart of this new graduate degree in my university, which will be very unique to not only the UNC system, but probably this country. So I feel like, at this juncture of this interview, I have definitely the work cut out for myself in the future. But I'm so thrilled for like what we can do with this work. And as I said at the beginning of the interview, it's just the acrobatic language is very rich, and it's very raw, and it's very human. And we connect in a human way that sometimes, when we try to be too cerebral or too like caught into ideologies, like we just don't give us the present in front of each other. So yeah, I mean, I find my ways just to I have found ways, and I'm excited that those ways have created some roots here.
That's amazing. I really like your idea, and I've never really thought about it that way. Of the circus arts feeds that tangible nature of artistic evolution and development, rather than, like you said, rather being a little bit ethereal in other sense about what is good and what is bad. And I think I never really thought about it that way. So I appreciate that thought process. The other thing I think that it's really interesting for me that, and that bringing that ethos and that approach into academia is something that is quite groundbreaking, because I think right now most arts institutions that are training artists and technicians and stage managers and all of that is there for to go feed the corporate machine of theatre and production. So to redirect that focus into a community or social circuses or those sort of what arts has stemmed from, what we changing culture, exposing culture, being a mirror of culture, and working within the communities is just it's really inspiring. And actually I've come across a number of these initiatives recently that has made me feel a lot more hopeful about the arts in the future, because I think it's necessary. We went really into the corporate realm, and I think we've got to get back to why this careers and art forms exist in the first place, and to for anybody that says art should not be political, that's just the most ridiculous thing. Arts has always been political, even from the jester poking fun at the king many years ago, when in traditional theater, right? Like, that was the way that they could comment on society. That was the way that they could ridicule society or rich people or the way people lived. That's embedded in arts. So I commend you for your mission. It's amazing, and I want to come and see some of that work when I get to America, for sure.
Me too.
I created a show, and this is a show in which we use some circus, but also was physical theater and whatnot. It was part of a trilogy of work that I'm doing of the migrant perspective, and it was Picaro, which is a solo piece, and then La Bestia, which is the one that I talked about with Nuvesu. But then I did a show with the students called Migrant X. In that show was a combination piece with a playwright, and just the story that is kind of placing. I was able to work with deferred action students here, like students that are on the DACA, they're undocumented and with permits to study. The students in the process decided to change the script and talk to the playwright about how their stories were not represented. So we did so, and working with a playwright that that was kind of in line with our views. Like, she was completely game with it, right? She's also Mexican American and so on. The show was presented here was a walk-in show. It had a reality. There is no services, really, no scholarship for DACA students. The students said that straight up, and it was also done in choreography and gesturing, some lifts and acrobatics and so on. The provost came to see the show, and we directed the provost to go and see that particular angle. So, that connects directly. Again, arts intersect reality. Like, we are in the creative process, the student brings reality, we change that, we intersect another point of reality, and just try to be catalysts of little changes by doing the work. And I said, and if if my example of going through cracked doors open doesn't tells you more, Anna probably know this or no, I am currently the president-elect of the Association of Theater and Higher Ed. So, the largest association of theater professors in this country, and in part I owe that to the work of Nuvesu, to the work of community, to the work of doing socially conscious work. And my side of social circus is primarily circus for social change, right? It's circus for social action, and it's circus for social intervention. So, I don't know. I don't know until I don't know how long I can keep doing these many things. Say that as of now, the passion will always be there, and I think the stories will continue to rise. I only hope that and again, one of the reasons why I'm in academia, I want to see more people empowered, more people feeling that the arts have different, instead of, I keep saying to myself, I used to begin just by saying, don't wait for your call, create your own work. There are ways in which you can generate some work, get some funding, begin your own work, and who knows, that's gonna get momentum, and ultimately you create your own company. There's avenues like that. Now I say that, and on top of that, say don't let anybody shush you or shush you or try to quiet you. Like, do your own work and speak your truth directly and strongly. Nothing is gonna stop you, honestly. As artists, we have a lot of freedom. We don't live in other places in which, like, our lives might be more in danger. We are in here, we can say things. And I think the more we say things, the bigger the chances we have that people are gonna listen. If we keep being quiet, nobody's gonna listen. And then there's not gonna be any change. So as artists, we just can't be quiet. That's the gesture's gonna be quiet. Like, we can't be quiet. That's what I'm saying.
Love it. I think that's a great way to wrap up this conversation. And thank you very much for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. That was amazing.
But yes, don't be quiet.
Thank you both. Don't be quiet, speak your truth. And acrobatics is such a bold language, and it brings us into a level of humanity. And ultimately, that's what we need. We need community, literally, people in front of each other with a common goal, looking ahead, to feel each other in presence of each other, and just dream. So anyways,
Amazing.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you, Carlos.
Theater at Life is a global media site for entertainment. Memberships start at only $38 per year. You can have unlimited access to our daily published articles, including entertainment news and the writings of active industry professionals, ensuring that you are always up to date on the global happenings in the world of entertainment. Become a part of the international entertainment community and join us now at www.theaterartlife.com.